We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
G'day and welcome to another live recording of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there is more than one way to be a man. And I dare say we do that pretty dang well. We're just simplifying manhood and masculinity here. Small task, small effort. Boyce and my co-host, of course, affectionately likes to challenge that and say that we're complicating things. And you know what? Maybe a little bit from column A and maybe a little bit from column B. But today we are joined by Brock Olsen, a dating coach here who I've been connected with here in Chattanooga, who has some pretty insightful content and I believe some tidbits that are going to help those of you listening who may consider yourself open and available to entering into the dating pool. He's going to share some tips, some strategies, some things that he's learning from his many years helping men and women in the dating world. And we're going to have a fun conversation. So Brock, welcome to the show, mate.
Yes, Brandon, thank you for having me on today, sir.
Yeah, I want to kick off right away. Many out there who are in the pursuit or have an interest in entering into the dating pool, it's hard to go too far online without seeing a bunch of pickup artists start to come up. You know, they want to show you strategies and techniques that promote kind of persuasion tactics and short-term attraction. I want to ask you, how does your coaching philosophy differ from that approach? And what do you fundamentally believe is wrong with the pickup artist scene?
Sure. Yeah, I try to do my very best at distinguishing my coaching and my approach, my philosophy from that of pickup artistry, short-term gratification, persuasion tactics that aren't, let's just say, very ethical. I do not advocate for pickup artistry whatsoever. I think it's a very insincere way of starting out a potential relationship. And anybody who's using pickup artistry to do approaching or things like that, I think they can all feel that there's such a lack of sincerity and genuine authenticity when they're doing it. Like, oh, I don't really think I would say something like that, or that feels a little bit gross. Like, it is, because you're not being true to yourself. Being able to just start a conversation with somebody by picking up on social cues is so much more genuine than any type of pickup artist, any type of, fun little phrase like, oh, always have this joke to say. I'm like, how about you put all that stuff aside and actually just be genuine to who you are? Go talk to somebody, start asking some sincere and genuine questions and try to get to know them, like build something of substance by using tools of substance. So yeah, I'm definitely against that short-term gratification. I definitely promote long-term success. I want you to have the tools and the techniques. I want you to know yourself. I want you to have the confidence to create, sustainable relationships, which I think so many people are really struggling to create today.
Certainly are. And I can relate so much to those who fall into that camp of thinking that, oh, there's a technique, there's a joke, there's a thing that needs to be said, there's a way I need to dress, because that was me, dude. In my early 20s, I come from a place called the Gold Coast in Australia. We're essentially the Jersey Shore of Australia. Right. It's all, plastic surgery, big tattoo, big muscles, tattoos, peacocking, tight shirts, and fist pumping at the club. That was the game. And I remember picking up, speaking of the game, Neil Strauss's book, The Game, and trying to implement those techniques where he had essentially taken the techniques from the pickup artist world and was teaching ways to, use them essentially. And I tell you, man, not some of my prouder moments in trying to go out there and really, what was the deeper motivation that I wasn't even aware of? Connection. I was looking for connection. I mean, I might have thought of it as, oh, getting laid. That was a notch on the headboard that, made me feel valuable and successful. But really beneath it all, it was like, man, I don't know how to relate to women.
Sure. Yeah. I don't like we don't even know how to ask good questions, like how to get to know somebody. Yeah. That's definitely a big issue. But, you did hit the nail on the head with there are some aspects to, I don't want to credit this to the pickup artistry, but the psychology of having a good presentation, making sure you're dressing well, making sure you present yourself well, being able to communicate, being charismatic, being confident. Some of that can get a little murky in the idea of what is a pickup artist or what is pickup artistry. There are some blurred lines there, but I think it all comes down to what is your objective? Are you looking for short-term gratification? Are you just needing an ego boost? Are you just seeking validation because you can't give it to yourself? I think that the people who are subscribing to that type of content or pickup artistry, those are the people who are struggling for like sense of self identity, validation. They can't give it to themselves. They need outside sources to give that to them.
Interestingly, there was a study that was done that found that a lot of people that are now joining the incel movement, so involuntarily celibate, i.e. these are men that are choosing to essentially remove the influence of women from their lives entirely and choosing to be celibate. A large number of them have come from the PUA community, so pickup artistry community. And I find that a pretty interesting tell to suggest that, there is really no long game in that space. And not to say that someone didn't pluck up the courage to research some jokes and dress better than they would usually and maybe struck up gold and found the person they want to spend the rest of their life with. But there certainly doesn't seem to be a lot of substance in that world. And I think we can see that now with its diminishing popularity.
I completely agree. And the type of like social media content that seems to go viral is generally based around that very shallow interaction, trying to, like you said, trying to peacock, trying to show off, be more than what you really are. And you're basically like building a house of straw. It's not going to stand. There's absolutely no way, because, I think we're talking mostly about guys here. Like, this is something guys do. You're supposed to be the architect of the relationship that you're going to build. And how can you possibly create a foundation when you're doing it by renting a Lamborghini on Saturday for the weekend, and you're wearing clothes you don't usually wear, and you're saying things you don't usually say, and you're hanging out with people who you don't really like, trying to impress people who you don't even know. So we really do need to do some self-work. And that's the work I do with guys every single day.
Let's talk motivations. So when men come to you, what are generally the surface level motivations? And then when you do some digging, what are the deeper ones? And then I'm going to ask you about women.
Sure. I would say that the majority of guys that reach out to me, and I'd say it's an age demographic from 22 to 52. So it ranges pretty large. And it's that guys are wanting more access to women, not necessarily like an abundance of women, but they just want to attract more quality women that they can potentially have something long term with. Surprise, this is what most guys are reaching out to me for. They're not just trying to, like you said, like have another notch in the headboard. That's not what, and I don't work with guys that are just trying to do that. I work with guys who are actually trying to work on themselves so that they know how to be in a healthy and sustainable relationship. So they'll reach out to me saying like, I don't know how to attract women. I keep getting ghosted, all these types of things, which are very, very common frustrations. So I help them manage that. I help them understand the psychology of women, how they're presenting themselves, the signals that they're giving off that make them not attractive. So we overcome those. But then just because I tell them how to make themselves attractive, I've only done what a pickup artist would do. Now I have to go further. I have to take them into, now, how do you build from that? Now that you have some attention, what are you going to do with it? Are you actually going to get to a second date, a third date? How do you manage that conversation? How do you conduct yourself like a gentleman after that? How do you present confidence and healthy masculinity? How do you ask good questions? How do you make that person that you're on a date with or that you're courting, how do you make them feel seen and validated? Because a lot of guys don't know how to even do this. So I'm working with them from the very beginning all the way until basically until they get married. I will work with them throughout the relationship until they say, hey, you got me to where I wanted to be.
What are the common threads and the distinctions that you're noticing between different age demographics?
Well, I would say the over 30, like 38 and up, they probably had, not probably, they've definitely had more opportunities with women. They are starting to pick up on patterns. They are likely dissatisfied with patterns. Maybe they've been married before. They don't want to replicate those past negative patterns. They want to know how to create, like I said, sustainable relationships. They want to avoid the mistakes that they made in their 20s, but they don't really know how, and they just don't understand what the dating landscape looks like today, because it's very different from even 10 years ago. It just is. And so guys who are like in their mid 30s and 40s and later, maybe they haven't dated in 20 years, and that's a big jump. That is a big jump. So much has changed, not just in the way that we interact, say on like social media or dating apps, but just the way that we have created new expectations of what the dating experience should be like, what a partner should be providing, what gender roles even are, or how do we even communicate what you want? Do you want a traditional relationship? Do you want something that's a little bit more modern? Like, how do we even communicate that? And then trying to build positive, healthy tension so that you're not having to restart the dating phase like every couple of months with a new person. Like, how do you actually build something with all the distractions that are happening? But the younger guys, I'd say like 30 and under, they're reaching out to me because they're just not even getting attention. They've not spoken to a woman in months. They've never had a positive compliment from a woman. They've never gotten a date, a second date. They are really striking out and they have no idea where to turn. Of course, they can go to social media and find a lot of that content we were just talking about, a lot of that shallow surface level. Hey, man, just get your money right. That's all you need to do. And that is really taking a big toll on a lot of men's mental health, thinking that you're nothing if you're not making a minimum 6 figures. So,
got you.
Yeah, so I really try to help those guys out quite a bit in understanding how to build their self-worth outside of monetary accomplishment.
Right. So yeah, the metric isn't did you get a second date or are you now in a relationship with this person? It's what are you learning from each interaction? What do you gain? Are you starting to be able to get clear on what your qualifiers are? What are your green lights and your red lights as far as, okay. So it sounds like a more inside out approach, as in like you're working on the vessel itself and their own psyche, their own self-awareness, their own self-worth, as opposed to some external, I've slept with this many people, I've been on this many dates, I've been on, right? So we're talking age here. Are you just working with people that are looking for the traditional male-female relationship or straight relationship, or are there others that you're working with?
No, I work with everybody, men and women, different backgrounds, different orientations, whatever their ultimate goal is, as long as it is something that's rooted in healthy psychology, something that is going to be sustainable, that is founded in ethical behavior. Obviously, I don't want to coach a guy who just wants to get laid every single weekend. That's not my client. I will take them on and tell them that there's more to life than just that you should be seeking goals that are much more important than those somewhat arbitrary experiences, because that stuff just doesn't last. It just, and it eats away at you. It absolutely does. So like I said, being able to be self-sustaining in your own validation is one of the biggest things that I teach men and women, because if you are relying on her or him to give that to you, that is the foundation of a codependent relationship. And that is the last thing I want to teach people. I want to teach people how to love with detachment.
So I heard Arthur Brooks, I mentioned him a lot on the show. He's a social scientist, professor at Harvard, and he has a great course called The Art and Science of Happiness. And when he talks about distinctions around relationships and happiness, he says, we attract our opposite, but we also attract our emotional equivalent. And so what I'm getting from what you're sharing, if people are going in with their current awareness of their emotional intelligence, their strengths, their weaknesses and such, they're going to attract that same vibration in many ways. So if they're not at their potential best, they're going to find exactly that when they're out there. Is that what you're saying? What
they'll do is they will settle for what is at their best. So I want people to continually be growing, because if you are not really developed, if you don't know how to pick up on emotional inadequacies, you'll settle for that, because that is a reflection of you, but you don't know how to identify anything on a higher frequency. So you see this all the time with people who are just not really good fits for one another. They're constantly toxic with each other. Like, that doesn't just happen. You too are aligned with your lack of emotional EQ. Like, neither one of you is higher than the other. Even to engage with somebody on a consistent basis that's like that, shows where you are as well. So yes, they are a reflection of it. So we need to constantly be increasing our own EQ. And we do that quite a bit by dating, by seeing what else is out there, by practicing conversations, and like I said, the tension building, and just seeing what boundaries are, how to communicate those, and what it looks like, when it feels like when someone tries to cross them. So we have to practice.
Yeah, you need to receive that feedback, right? Try things, take risks, and you receive that feedback. So there's I always joke to my wife, like, we met many years before we started dating. And I always joke, oh, thank God you didn't date me then, because we wouldn't be here today.
Sure. I tell my wife that all the time. If we met 2 weeks earlier, it wouldn't have happened.
Interesting. What shifted?
Well, I was trying to go on a first date as frequently as I possibly could. I was gathering information. Some of them I would actually say, hey, I'm trying to get a little bit of data. I would like to ask you some questions. But for the most part, I was trying to go on as many dates as I possibly could in about 4 months. First dates, very casual, go get coffee, have a great conversation, and that was it. And I was like, okay, I'm totally done with this. I'm burnt out. I'm going to take about 3 months off. About 2 weeks into that, I met my wife. Yeah. And if I had met her 2 weeks earlier, I would not have been in the headspace, the emotional space to take that on.
Yeah. Interesting. So counterintuitive. Well, yeah, I mean, I tell you what, I struck out more when I was living on the Gold Coast. I had my own business. I, had a great car, money, all the such. And then I met my wife when I had negative $1,000 in a savings account. Somehow I negotiated with my bank to let me go into debt in a savings account. And I was living in a van with my dog. What a peacock, right?
Right.
How did I land the smoke show that is my wife in that state? And it truly came down to ugly relationships, great lessons, a lot of deep introspection and reflection and mentorship.
That's so true.
Yeah.
My story is oddly almost identical. I was living on a homestead with a friend, or he was trying to build a homestead, and I was helping him do that. And we had gotten into a bit of a disagreement, and he said, hey, you need to go, can't be here anymore. I was like, no problem, no big deal. And I was essentially without a place for about 3 weeks while I waited for an apartment to open up. I was living at the Holiday Inn. I had tried to sell my business. I thought I did. And the guy who I sold it to literally just didn't pay me anything. So I was like, oh, I had a couple $1,000, like maybe $3,000 to my name. And my wife stayed with me through the whole thing. We'd only been dating for maybe a month and a half. I have no idea why she stayed with me. No idea, because she had plenty of options.
Well, let me challenge you. You say no idea. She has an idea. You've probably had the conversation. Why'd she stay?
Sure. She says that she stayed because I was genuine. I was fun. I was unique. I was charismatic. But she knew that I was going through a big time struggle. And she was not looking for anything serious, but she could tell that I was serious about her. And so she decided to, hey, let me see how serious this guy actually is, because she hadn't ever seen that level of investment from a guy before, or at least not somebody that would treat her well. So I was kind of one of the first guys to really treat her well when things were going really bad in my life. And I gave her an out. I told her, I said, this is not going to be easy for like the next 4 to 6 months, but I can absolutely rebuild. I know what I'm capable of. And I think when I said that, she could tell the conviction in my voice. She's like, yeah, this guy can probably do exactly what he's saying. And I did. But she had no reason to really believe me.
Sure. Wow. I'm happy it worked out, man.
Yeah, me too.
So I want to talk about homosexual relationships, because we have a large community of GBTQ men. It always catches our guests when we omit the L, right? Because of course we're a men's organization. So do the same. Much of we spoke about the inside out work, learning about understanding the psychology of different sexes. What do the same rules apply? And what distinctions? What are some different distinctions? Because I'm going to talk about population density next, and I know that really ramps up for those in the LGBTQ community. So
sure. Well, I'll say for the male to male, it is a much faster pace than it is for a male to female relationship, because you have two people who are essentially the pursuers. So there's almost no like, I'm gonna let you chase me. Guys don't do that. They will have those conversations. They're not gonna be fickle. They're gonna be very like direct. So the pace of that relationship usually happens very, very quickly, and I'm all for it. I really am. I think that whatever that pace feels natural to you, you should go with that, because that is what is basically the honeymoon phase. And anybody who's had the honeymoon phase knows it's one of the best experiences of your life. It's hard to maintain that. It's usually like a 3 to 5 month experience. But as far as the men go, if they are able to have those important and deep conversations while the multi-pursuant dynamic is occurring, and it's not just about the physical intimacy, those relationships, if they can turn into something long-term, actually have a higher rate of success than men to women and women to women.
Interesting.
Yep.
In connecting with my gay friends, I had this like hypothesis, and many of them have confirmed this, is that there's almost this element of, there's still the discovery, but there's also that awareness of, I've been through a rite of passage in coming out and owning my identity, and you've been through a rite of passage, and for some that is smoother than others. For some they have swallowed a bunch of pills and trying to end their life because they grew up in a culture, a society, or in an environment that didn't support how they were born, how I believe they were placed on this earth, right? And do you feel like that comes into play a little bit? This is kind of understanding of like being able to own their identity, who they are. And look at us, man, we're in Tennessee, a bit slower to adopt some of these more progressive social swings and acceptance around people's sexuality.
Yeah, for sure. I'm from Southern California, so gay relationships are nothing that I'm not familiar with. Coming here to Tennessee, definitely a lot more hesitancy to accepting that lifestyle, for sure. So when you are in that community and you meet another person who's a member of it, you almost feel like you have experienced a bit of a war together at some point. We don't know what level of exposure you might have had, but like that's almost a bonding experience. And so like the gay community is very close knit. They just are. Like, it's a good thing. I think that's a beautiful thing, actually. Like, what better to come together than under a flag of love and mutual world view. So yeah, I completely think so.
Okay. And what about when it comes to, so let's talk population density now, because that has been one of the most common things. So we live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is 200,000 people, centralized. It expands a little bit outside. So it's small. 2 hours away, you have Atlanta, which has 6 million. And so my gay and lesbian friends have all been saying, like, I've been having to extend my Tinder radius, and we'll talk about online dating in a little while, but their radius to Atlanta and Nashville and Knoxville, because they're having such a hard time finding people in these smaller, well, we're a big town or a small city, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, how much of a challenge are you finding locally with, we just don't have a large population?
Well, that's not even just to the gay community. That's for every community that's trying to date. Everybody is very well aware that cities of our size, 200, 300,000 people, it's very hard to date because we all know each other in some way, or we know somebody who knows somebody, and we're not that far removed. So for the gay community, especially, like, it's much much harder. So yeah, we are having to find ourselves extending our dating radius an extra 100 miles or so we can, broaden that net. So we're looking in bigger places: Nashville, Atlanta, Knoxville, Birmingham, things like that. Like that's happening in every community. Like the amount of women, for example, that tell me that there are no good men to date in Chattanooga, and off the top of my head, I can think of 5, but I get what they're saying.
Yeah.
That they are going to have to spread it further. And I have guy friends doing the exact same thing. They're fishing in all these other ponds instead of the one that they're currently living. And yeah, it's definitely something that needs to happen. But I don't think that once you widen your gaze that you should lose focus of where you are. Because I had a similar idea. I was like, yeah, it's probably going to be really hard to date and, not have, when I go to a bar or some guy's like, hey, I took your girl out, like something like that. But it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. Like my wife is from Ringgold, but she never really came to Chattanooga. So no one really knew of her. I think she had maybe 3 boyfriends in her adult life. Like that was it. And yeah, it wasn't really that hard. I think people would like to say that it's harder than what it really is, because it gives them a reason to.
How much of it is it? Yeah. How much is it a cop out to go?
Yes.
It gives them and that's something that Isaiah Berlin has this. What was it called?
Gotta look
it up. This is it's so good. It's gonna have to come back to me. But essentially, it's this. It's a way to justify a certain state. So if it's if I truly believe that, because I live in a town like Chattanooga, which only has 300,000 people, if I truly believe that's the reason why I'm not having quality dates, then that can completely justify me getting off the path.
Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, self-fulfilling prophecy, and that could be in many ways. Whether it's money, whether it's weight, right? We can easily create those paradigms. And so are you finding in places like Chattanooga, let's just say for some of your gay or lesbian clients, that how much do you challenge that narrative?
Well, I challenge it all the time. Like anytime somebody says that there's no options and whichever community they're speaking from, that there's no options, there's no good this, there's no good that. I'm like, you just are not trying hard enough, or you don't know how to look. It's honestly one of the two things, because the pool here is so much bigger than it was 20 years ago. Imagine what it was like back then. Now we're almost spoiled for choice, and we're looking for someone that's going to check off every single one of our boxes. I have so many clients who have found people that check off all their boxes, but they're like, yeah, I'm just not feeling the chemistry. I was like, so even when you do find that, it's not enough.
Yeah, interesting. So I want to read this, then I want to tug on that thread. So
yeah, go ahead.
Isaiah Berlin says, when the natural road towards human fulfillment is blocked, human beings retreat into themselves, become involved in themselves, and try to create inwardly that world which some evil fate has denied them externally. If you cannot obtain from the world that which you really desire, you must teach yourself not to want it. If you cannot get what you want, you must teach yourself to want what you can get. This is a very frequent form of spiritual retreat in depth into a kind of inner citadel. The inner citadel is what it's called, in which you try to lock yourself up against all the fearful ills of the world. So we see this a lot in our work. We call it out as spiritual bypassing. It's like, if I'm getting any form of resistance in my pursuit to this thing that I want, if I feel any form of discomfort as I try and push towards dating and just putting myself out there and putting myself in a position to be rejected, the second I feel that, the second they don't laugh at the joke, boom, it confirms all of these previous beliefs that it's because I am not fit enough, rich enough, handsome enough, tall enough. Great example here is, if your leg is wounded, you can try to treat the leg. If you cannot, then you cut off the leg and announce that the desire for legs is misguided and must be subdued.
Right. No, 100%. We see this happen all the time in people who have had failed relationships or have been hurt in dating, almost villainizing an entire opposite gender. It's like all men are trash, for example. It's like, so now that's a way of painting the idea of being with the man as negative.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine, Kenny, actually before this conversation, and he, he works in a lot of social spaces and a lot of civic work, and he, is a man that chooses to stand in the fire in those conversations. As a straight white guy, he's often got a target put on him, and when he sits in a space where someone says men are trash, he's like, that hurt a little. Can I say something? Well, supposedly I'm on top of the privilege pyramid, so I can't necessarily go there. And so but he does, and he creates a lot of beautiful dialogue and challenging certain narratives. And a question he now poses in these spaces and these circles: say your belief is men are trash, or I'm unlovable, I'm not tall enough, whatever. Say that is your true belief, and that is a lens in which you're looking at the world. What does your life look like 4 years from now? If all men are trash, how does the world look different in that reality? How does your life look different in that reality? And it's a conversation I'm going to continue with him. In fact, he's going to come on the show and we're going to cut it up. But it's like, yeah, if that is my belief, I will create that reality. I will exist in spaces where that is the commonly held belief.
Sure.
And in turn, boom, comfort zone, confirmation bias, echo chamber.
Right.
Whereas it's important to challenge those beliefs, because who am I to think at the age of 32 that how I see the world in however many binaries I establish is exactly the way I'm going to think when I'm 42? Because I certainly think different than I did when I was 22.
Of course. We've all had that embarrassing Facebook memory pop up. You're like, oh.
Every day I look at my Facebook memories and I scroll and I go delete.
Right.
Only Zucks has it. Delete.
Right. Imagine how you'll view things in 10 years from now, and how almost embarrassed you'll be of things that you're talking about, thinking about, publishing, putting out, feeling now. Like, how much growth do you think will happen in 10 years from now?
Well, and a practice I'm learning is to give myself compassion too.
Sure.
Like, because some of the things I said online are objectively just stupid. Like, misguided, just
not fully developed,
and learning to read that rather than, oh, what an idiot, reading it as, man, that's just that's the way you saw the world, that's the way that you were ticking back then, and honoring the growth from there, because we're all guilty of saying, doing things that don't truly align with our values, or say things that get misrepresented and cause and have an impact on others that, we learn, okay, even though it wasn't my intention, there was an impact.
Sure.
And how can I clean that up and take ownership for it?
We're thrilled to have BetterHelp as a sponsor for the Mankind podcast. BetterHelp matches you with a licensed therapist for live one-on-one sessions, someone trained to listen, support, and offer helpful insights. If getting one-on-one support feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to betterhelp.com/mankind and get 10% off your first month of therapy.
I want to talk quickly. So there is, through media, through movies, through television, through books, there is this romantic idea that the man plucks up the courage to walk up to the girl and introduce himself, to begin a conversation. And as we have moved through the past couple of years in a post-Me Too era, there are a lot of people that are becoming very vocal about how that is harassment, how that is, not respecting or being aware of boundaries. Where is the line to be towed there? Because I also have conversations with a lot of men and women who will say, I would love to be approached. That would solve half the challenges here.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts and take on that in 2025?
Well, this is so multi-layered here. So with all due respect to women who say that I would love to be approached by more guys, they are meaning I would love to be approached by more high quality guys, more good looking, more attractive, more on their purpose guys, because the majority of guys who are willing to do approaching like consistently are kind of like those guys we were talking about earlier, who are just kind of going through the motions. They're not really interested in something deep. I'm not saying that the guys who are approaching aren't, but there's a good percentage of them who aren't, who don't really care about rejection because they just like, it's not a big deal to them. They're just going through it. But to the guys who are hesitant in approaching an attractive woman in a public place, you have to understand how women experience the world. And the first layer of their experience is a little bit of fear at pretty much all times. There's a little bit of fear because at any time, men can become unsafe. So if you're going to approach a woman, think that, okay, how can I immediately make sure this person feels safe? Well, I'm going to make sure I don't get like 4 inches away from their face. I'm going to give them a little bit of space. I'm going to approach from an angle that they can see me coming. And I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be empathetic. I'm going to be engaging. I'm going to be a gentleman. I'm going to ask a good question, a probing question, something that's interesting, something that's memorable. I'm also going to wait for a good moment. Like, I'm not going to do it while she's at the gym on the elliptical. That's probably not a good time to approach her. So finding those little moments where you can interject just for a moment, just to make an interaction enjoyable. That's something I definitely help men with, is seeing those little spots where they can actually do that. And on the other hand, I do tell women, hey, if you want men to approach you, make yourself approachable. If you're going out with a bunch of girls, that's probably not going to be the way that you're going to get approached, because that's super intimidating.
Gotcha.
Break away from your friends on occasion, get off your phone, look up, smile. You'll be approached 10 times as many times. I promise.
And I guess, in spaces like this and in 2025, it's important to illuminate what you said. If a woman's motivation is to be approached, make yourself approachable. And I think, that's something that, generally speaking, men do not have to worry about. Walking down the street, feeling safe, being in public spaces, and I think I think the onus is, I think we can step up to do a bit of heavy lifting on being far more conscientious of body language and cues, and just to say, you know what, my motivation and desire to talk to you is not more important than your inbuilt survival mechanism to feel safe. And so when those cues come up, have a lovely evening.
Yeah. And don't take it as rejection. You've done, like, perhaps she is so into a trauma response that a male presence just makes her feel uncomfortable. I don't care if you're Channing Tatum, he's not going to get her number tonight. Like, you got to move on, buddy. And taking no for an answer at that moment, take your dignity and go. Don't push it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something that we're raising our daughter to in our household. No means no. Right. Really enforcing that and understanding her power, and that, F politeness. If you're in an uncomfortable situation, make a scene, right? Someone's feelings do not matter. You can repair that later if it's a misunderstanding, but
get loud and get attention on you. Yes.
And I want her to know that there are men in her life who will respect those no's.
Yes. 100%.
So let's get into, man, it's a shame that we're just covering so much territory in the time that we have. There are some questions here that I want to say until next time. So I'm going to hold and shelve some of these if it's possible to get you back on. But I want to shift the conversation to dating apps just quickly. So I heard a really great quote. I'm trying to recall who it was from, but it was like, okay, inherently, biologically, we are attracted to our opposite, because what that does is it completes a bigger picture. It's not this idea of I'm looking for my equal. I'm looking for someone to complete the picture here. And so we're innately attracted to our opposites in a lot of ways. My wife and I have many of them. In our Venn diagram where it crosses over, beautiful. But I love that she's oriented one way and I'm oriented another. Dating apps does the opposite in many ways. It's, how can I find someone just like me? Because the limited information that's provided is outdoors, dogs, coffees, whatever. And he said it really well. He said, are you looking to find your opposite, someone you're going to have polarity and attractiveness to? Or are you looking to date someone like your sister?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I have done content on this very thing where I have talked about some of my clients and some of my friends who will describe to me because I'll do this exercise. I'm like, okay, I want you to describe to me what your ideal partner would be like. And this is coming from the guys, and they will describe. And I said, I know someone just like that. They're like, are you serious? Because I do a matchmaking service. I was like, yeah, I know somebody like that right now. I'm like, well, who is it? I said, it's you. You literally just described your interests, your philosophies. Like, you just described yourself. Why do you want to date yourself? Shouldn't you be looking for somebody to add to your life? And just seeing this realization on their face that they're not even thinking about how somebody else can bring more abundance and beauty, just it's probably one of my most enjoyable coaching experiences is watching it. Like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for my twin, and that's not how chemistry works. Chemistry works by having opposing compounds coming together to create a reaction. If you want chemistry, that's what you got to have. You have to have some polarity there. And yes, you're right. Dating apps are designed to find some commonalities. And if there's not enough commonalities, people are just like, yeah, I'm out. Yeah, you're right.
So that could be its own episode, because that is such a, I mean, you see so many people that are like, I've deleted it off my phone. It's, take 10, it's just not working, like finding that person. And I truly, it is my belief, it is my lived experience. And anecdotally, I've witnessed this a lot, that the more I commit to doing my inner work, my inner digging, like the tough, ugly, nasty stuff inside of me, it will, with anything, when I have a clear vision and goal, and my wife and I have a clear vision and goal, the yeses become far more clear. The nos become way more clear. If it isn't an F yes, it's an F no. And I think that applies in dating too, because it's, okay, knowing my values, knowing my worth, knowing me, knowing my flaws and the dirty, icky stuff, and being able to own that in a way. I believe I attracted my wife because we were vibrating at a similar frequency. We had
at the right time.
At the right time, right? At the right time. And it is a counterintuitive approach, right? To look inwards, do that digging, do that work, because it's not linear. It's not easy to track. It's not easy to measure. It's like, oh, I've just been doing a bunch of Gestalt therapy, screaming into a bucket,
right?
Working through the Oedipus complex I have with my mother because the umbilical cord is psychologically still attached. I don't see how this is going to relate to me getting in a committed relationship, but it will. It will. Like, I want to shift the conversation now. We were originally going to begin with this, but I think it's more naturally and perfectly come to the end of our conversation. We initially were scheduled last week at this exact same time to have this conversation. And a friend of mine brought to my attention, there was a Reddit thread which had some pretty accusatory information and statements about you, Brock. And so I made very clear in my conversation to say, look, we are a public-facing organization in the Mankind Project. We have an international influence, and we're represented in a lot of places, that I would love to at least have a conversation first. So we weren't going to record. Let's talk about rescheduling, but I wanted to get your side. I wanted to get your take. And I want to, without getting too much into the weeds, what I want to highlight, which gave me the green light to book this episode, is you took ownership for some things that contributed to this regrettable circumstance or situation. And so let's just give some context here. The information I had was that you were given the reins to a dating community here in Chattanooga. And it was only for a short period of time, but you take it from there.
Yeah, I was given the reins to Date Chattanooga, and I was going to be the community lead for these singles events that were monthly held. And with that, I was given all the email addresses, and somehow I accidentally put those email addresses into my newsletter. They were supposed to be separate, but I'm not the most tech savvy guy, so I put them into the big old pot with everyone who has subscribed to my newsletter. And I had released a newsletter that was talking about submission and what that looks like, what that's about, the difference in that and oppression. And the people who don't know me, who are the people who I just added to that newsletter, didn't like that newsletter at all, justifiably so, because the structure of it was to be slightly clickbaity, to get people to read it, to get them engaged.
So what was the headline?
The headline. It was why women should want to submit.
Clickbait.
Right.
See,
You like that?
Marketing.
Right, exactly. So it's how people will.
Mm-hmm.
But what that newsletter was a call to male accountability. Maybe 5% of it was regarding women and what they should be looking for in a man to feel safe. But it was a big call to male accountability in terms of what attributes he should be consistently providing and confident and solid in to make a woman feel safe in a dynamic where she might want to submit, and what that would look like, what submitting even looks like. But most people didn't read the whole thing. But the people who did, who don't like that word submission, I think most people don't.
Yeah, sure.
It's kind of got a little bit of a negative connotation. Again, it's often misunderstood and meaning as oppression.
Well, here's what happens, right? Is you have public figures like, say, Jordan Peterson, for example. Like, Boyson's very, very, very open and honest about his dislike for the man, and I have a little bit more nuanced thoughts around. I think some of his messages are great, but as soon as he got in with the Daily Wire, you could tell, and for those listening, the Daily Wire is a conservative streaming network. You could tell he's drinking the Kool-Aid, doubling down, not providing context to a lot of what he's saying.
Right.
Speaking in binaries, meaning there's only two options, this or that. And people are getting so conditioned now through social media that when they see a word like that, they probably would lump you into a certain group or a certain type of man, or your type of dating services, is for men like this, or men who believe those things. And we as an international organization go through that a lot. I mean, all throughout our 40 years, why don't you do things for women? Why? And what we have to explain is, well, our mission is to indirectly impact the lives of women and non-binary folk by helping give men the opportunity to take ownership of their lives, create safer spaces in their communities and in their families, right? But when we're putting out articles and posts that, well, here's the sad thing about marketing. The algorithm rewards clickbait.
Yes.
It does.
It does.
And there's probably a whole other philosophical conversation that needs to be had around ethics and headings and all the rest. But it sounds like you, as a marketer, because in order for you to have the impact that you want to have for your services, which I believe to be, the intentions are pure, playing the game, right? Playing the marketing game. And Boyson gets onto me all the time because I like my headlines to be eye-catching. I won't put a headline that doesn't deliver. I believe won't deliver on the promise. But yeah, it's a tricky game there. So my question to you is, what have you learned from this, and what are the ways you're going to approach it differently going forward? Because what I haven't seen from you is you bite down on the mouthpiece and double down and just say F them. Right. In our first conversation, you showed a lot of compassion for these people.
Yeah, I absolutely do. The people who are in that Reddit thread, they responded exactly the way I think they should if the message of that newsletter was what they thought it was. And I would have been an advocate for that response, because I'm not a conservative. I don't believe that men should just have this unwielding power over women by any means. I think we're equal, and we bring so much to a relationship that nobody should just be automatically you should be submitting to me. I do not agree with that at all. So with those people, I completely understand. And what I hated to see, though, was I can see their hurt in either their own lives, their relationships, their marriages, things that haven't worked out, and that triggered them. And I didn't want the headline to trigger anybody. It's the last thing I wanted to do, but I wanted to get people to read it. Just
elicit a response.
That's exactly what I was
Yeah.
trying to do. It did get a response, but I didn't think that it would have gotten the response that it did per the content that was within. So, you can't always fix those types of things, but yeah, definitely going to be significantly more mindful in the future with those sensitive types of topics for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And who you put in your email list.
Yeah, that one's I'm going to be like, oh, gotta be careful.
Yeah. No. Well, and we've learned that with this show that, our mission is to have courageous conversations on taboo topics, to give our listeners the gift of going second. And in doing so, we put ourselves in a position to be misunderstood, put ourselves in a position to not provide fully fledged context or even fully fledged ideas. Sometimes it's just a hunch to go down a road or yank a thread, and that can end up in some tricky territory. But at the end of the day, something that social media doesn't always provide the space or opportunity for is ownership. Is ownership and accountability.
Yeah, and Reddit definitely doesn't.
No.
I was just reading all the comments, or people were screenshotting them to me. I was like, there's so much I would love to say to clear up, to soothe the pain that it seems like this newsletter caused for people, because that's not my agenda. I am here to help people. I'm not here to hurt or harm or cause negative feelings or thoughts. Like I actually want to be an agent of positive change and impact. So to see that that's how that was handled or received was definitely difficult. But like I said, I hope that I'm able to continue being an agent for positive change.
Yeah. Intentions and impact, right?
That's right.
Yeah. We can't just rest on that wasn't my intention. It's like, you know what? I see that there has been an impact based on this thing that I did. Right.
Yeah. I own it for sure.
Good on you, man. Good on you. More modeling of that. That's what I want to see from men, really. And I think one of the best ways we can do that is by calling men in and not calling them out. Look, sometimes dudes need to be called out, like plain and simple. Sure. But if I truly want to have the impact I want to have, if I want to reach across the aisle and touch the hearts and minds of people who I disagree with in many different ways, being nasty, being rude, being accusatory, and judging from a narrow mindset without any form of curiosity is just going to fulfill my own prophecy, and I'm going to keep them in that camp, as opposed to like, where are the ways that we can bridge gaps here and have deep and meaningful conversations. And we have men who have been on the show that own the ways that they've been violent, own the ways that they've harassed, own the ways that they've done these things. I mean, why would we even exist in San Quentin and Folsom Prison putting on programs such as we do with our Inside Circle program if we didn't believe that there should be opportunities for people to take ownership and responsibility for their actions?
I love it.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. Well, mate, let me ask you this.
Okay.
where to from here? What's your mission? What are you hoping to achieve in this phase of your life? And tell us about your podcast too. I want to hear about that.
Man, okay. Well, my mission is to continue having a positive impact on men and women's lives, to help people understand the patterns that they have been invested and involved with for years that have caused them to not have relationship or dating success. I want to help them heal from that, to confront it, to be accountable to it, and overcome it, because I think that the most beautiful thing that we can ever experience in life is a relationship. Like, that is what life is about, is relationships. Having somebody that's special in your life that's going to be your life witness is one of the most beautiful things that we can possibly aspire to have someone to do that with. So I want to help people get there. That's my number one objective. If I can help another person find their person, job well done. That's it. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to have that impact, because I know how much that means to so many people. Like, we're social creatures. We should have a partner in life. We just should. And then in terms of my podcast, Dating Today podcast, it's only available on YouTube right now, but it's a conversation about modern dating issues. We're talking about dating as a single parent, or dating emotionally unavailable partners, or what it's like dating in a small market like Chattanooga, things like that, and just kind of bridging that gap, getting the opinions from the community, discussing those. And me as a dating coach, I do offer advice per the topic and how I would handle it and what I think the best way to conquer those issues that are plaguing the current dating market.
Well, we will certainly have links to your website, the podcast, and your Instagram, because you post some great reels from the show as well. Brock,
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, mate. I appreciate so much when someone truly knows their topic. and it's just, I mean, look how much territory we covered. I'd love to get
a lot.
I'd love to get you back on to talk about toxic dating habits,
Sure.
Notions around self-worth versus external validation, which we covered in a good way, but also expectation management, because that's a big one. You know, there are these lessons in life that can't be learnt unless we live them, is what I'm learning. One of them is, money will not make you happy. It will not fulfill you. And all of us in stages of life when we haven't had money go, oh yeah, but I'm different, right? Test that on me.
For myself.
Yeah. And another one of those is that I've been hearing about and learning is that you're not in love with her or him or whoever. You just find them attractive and they're not giving you in. They're not giving you an in. They're not giving you, permission to get closer.
Sure.
So that's something I think would be fun to dive into. I'm sure you've got some insights into that.
Would love to. And on my website, I have a free managing dating expectations guide. You can just go download it. It's on that very topic.
Managing. Okay, cool. I'm going to put that in there too. Well, Brock, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Matt. I really appreciate it. I thank you for your ownership as well in the whole Date Chattanooga situation. I appreciate that in a big way. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will. And most of all, our thanks have to go to you, the listeners, those who show up each and every week to listen to these conversations, to dive into uncomfortable at times topics, and to show up better ways as fathers, as husbands, as sons, as brothers, as citizens. So the biggest thanks, of course, always goes to you. As a reminder, you can send us feedback. We want your questions. Me and Boyson are going to be tackling some questions. They've started to roll in. So please, you can find through the apps that you can actually go ahead and click the link in our show notes to give us some feedback on what questions you want us to answer. And of course, taking a minute to review us on Spotify and iTunes does a lot to the algorithms to get this show and these messages and these conversations out to others. So that is all from me. Lots of love, and we will see you next week. This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Boyson Hodgson and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. That is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.
Hey, it's Boyson here with the Mankind Podcast. We are closing in on 100 5-star reviews of this podcast, and we have a goal. Brandon and I want to get to 250 5-star reviews. So help us out, will you? Please? Go to the Mankind Podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a review. Thank you. Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind Podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.